When that country music hits, you know it's time for another hour-long talk of Locker Room Buzz. I'm your host, CJ Tully, and we have lots to get to in the sports world here today. We have lots going on with the Phillies, and that's where we'll start off here today, as they have been not making as many moves as you would have thought. They haven't really improved the lineup whatsoever. And this pitching rotation, we still have some question marks there. Later in the show, I'm also going to be getting to everything in college football. I know that you guys know that this has been the main majority of what we talked about here this season. And with the college football playoffs still on their great pace that they've been going, lots to still talk about there. Also, the transfer portal. We're seeing a lot of players be moved around the league, so I'll keep you guys posted with the latest in that. Also, the NFL playoffs starting this weekend. Who are my favorite picks to go far in this one? We have the firings on Black Monday, so lots going on in the NFL as well. I'll have a guest on later to talk about some of that. But like I mentioned, let's lead off here with the Philadelphia Phillies. So everybody knows my rant from a few months ago, how this Phillies team was depleting, how there was nothing really to look forward to this upcoming season, and they needed to make a splash. We still have yet to see that splash here with this Phillies team. Now, they bring in Adolis Garcia. That's not really bringing any juice to this team. If you did this maybe 2 or 3 years ago when you saw Adolis at probably his prime of his career, winning in the home run, or not winning the home run derby, but participating in the home run derby, we are seeing that power. He was a monster on and off the field. That's the Adolis I would have wanted to see here with this Phillies team. Now we saw a depleted Adolis Garcia last season. We haven't been seeing the same production out of him. He is more of a home run or bust at this point, and we're not even seeing that many home runs so far. So what can we get out of Adolis? That's still unclear. But Adolis couldn't be the only move you made this offseason, and that's still the only one we have seen. You bring in, I believe Brad Keller was his name, from the Cubs. So we're seeing what that is going to, we'll see what that can be here for this Phillies bullpen. You do lose Matt Strahm. You're losing a few other pieces. We do re-sign Kyle Schwarber. Still nothing with Nick Castellanos. That's pretty much a surefire. He's going to be out the door. Same with Max Kepler. So where can they still improve? Well, JT Realmuto, he is a free agent that we still haven't re-signed. Ranger Suarez is another name out there that we have yet to re-sign. And you look at somebody like Harrison Bader, who came in last year. He was somebody we traded for. You gave up a few pieces. And he's somebody I think that this team needs to bring back. Now, I was the first to say once we got him that he was not going to be enough for this team. He didn't make a difference, and he was going to be another platoon player. And now I'm the first one to tell you that I think we should overpay for him, bring him in. He's a locker room help. He helps you on the field, off the field. And he brought a dog to your team that you needed in the postseason. When he came up to bat, even when injured, that was something this team was missing, was that pop, that when you come up to the plate, the whole energy of the stadium changes. And Harrison Bader was able to bring that for you. In only 50 games with the Phillies, he had 54 hits, 11 doubles, 1 triple, 5 home runs, 16 RBIs, a 305 average, and an 824 OPS. That is a difference maker that you brought in midway through the season to help you in the postseason. Obviously, the injury hurt you, but if you can get a full season out of Harrison Bader, let him be your starting center fielder and see what he can bring to this lineup, I think that's what this Phillies team needs right now. You cannot keep relying on Garrett Stubbs to be this 40-year-old hanging out with high schoolers to be able to bring that kind of energy when you have that energy that you just need to bring back with a Harrison Bader. So he's somebody I'd still like this team to bring back. Then you have a Ranger Suarez, and yes, this rotation, there's still lots of question marks. Will Aaron Nola be able to get back to his ways? Will he still be able to be a Cy Young contender? Will Zach Wheeler even come back after his scary blood clot situation? Will he be able to come back? And if he does, will he be able to perform the same way that we had been seeing? And then you have somebody like an Andrew Painter, who this team has put so much into, and yet we haven't even seen a great production out of him in the minor leagues. Can we count on him to come in here in the major leagues and make a difference in this rotation? I think Ranger Suarez is more of a re-sign than you would have thought maybe in the middle of last season when you had players like Jesus Luzardo going off and you had Zach Wheeler going off. I think you now have to look at Ranger Suarez as a key piece to this rotation, and you're going to need to bring him back in some light. Now, JT Realmuto is somebody that I thought was a surefire re-sign. I didn't think there was any question that he would want to go anywhere else. Yes, he wants to be on a contending team, but with keeping Schwarber, with Harper over here, obviously, I would have thought that this is something that JT Realmuto would have wanted to continue, as he did come here to win the championship, and I don't think there's many other teams where you just plug them in and they're going to automatically win. The Phillies still give him a decent opportunity at that, and the fact that he's aging. I mean, does he think he's going to be getting a 3-4 year contract anywhere else? I figured the Phillies would bring him back on a 2 to 3 year contract. Just let him play it out, and I thought he might be taking a city discount to continue to play here in Philadelphia. But if that's not the case, the Phillies are starting to look at Ryan Jeffers from the Minnesota Twins. We do have a great connection now with the Minnesota Twins, as we traded with them a lot last trade deadline. But can Ryan Jeffers come in here and make a difference? JT Realmuto last year didn't have the worst of years, 12 home runs, a 257 average, 52 RBIs, and a 700 OPS. Yes, the bases got bigger, so the defense kind of fell off a little bit with him catching players stealing, and obviously that comes with age as well. But I don't think JT Realmuto is irreplaceable. I think he has a good presence in the locker room. His bat is very streaky. Ryan Jeffers last year hit 9 home runs, 47 RBIs with a 266 average and a 752 OPS. So there's not too much difference there to where if you're losing JT, you're losing this great all-star player that he was once you brought him in here. But I just think it's something to keep an eye on, because the fact that he hasn't been re-signed, and it was supposed to be the easiest re-sign of all of these free agents, I do believe that's something to keep an eye on when you're still looking for this outfield, because now you're going to be counting on Justin Crawford to come in here and be this huge difference maker, and you haven't really even seen that from him. Now, he's hitting for great average in the minor leagues. There isn't any pop, and I don't believe this team needs more pop. I'm completely fine with having an average hitter, but to really rely on somebody to come up here from the minors and be the change that this team needs in a lineup, that's asking a lot. And now the Phillies are looking at Randall Grichuk as a possible replacement. And it just seems like we keep looking at these same names for the past 3-4 years. Every trade deadline, there's these guys that just sit there and nobody wants. You look at the same like a Tommy Pham. Every year these players just sit there at the trade deadline and they're just passed around. And I don't think the Phillies are at that point right now. You can't just go out there and keep signing these below average mid players and continue to think that that's going to be what helps this team. You saw that with the Whit Merrifield. You saw it with the Max Kepler, where you keep trying to find these quick plug-and-play players, and you're not at that point right now. You need to bring in a difference maker. This team hasn't shown you that the core itself can get you over the hump, and bringing in somebody of a lower prospect, lower end, isn't necessarily going to be what brings you over that. You need to bring in another big name. Yes, Adolis Garcia is a name, but the way that he has played is much like a Randall Grichuk in the last few years. So where else can this Phillies team look? They're still looking at Bo Bichette as a possibility. Now, I'm not sure with this where that would change the infield up. You still have Bryson Stott, Trey Turner, and Alec Bohm. If you were to do that, I would assume you would trade one of them. I definitely don't think that's going to be Trey Turner at this point, but Alec Bohm has been a name that's been out there for a while. Maybe you can move Alec Bohm for something. Maybe you can bring in some kind of relief pitching or anything to help you there with a Bo Bichette coming in. He does have 18 home runs, 94 RBIs, a 311 average, and an 840 OPS last season. So a great season for him. I know he dealt with some injuries as well, but he's somebody that I think could be a difference maker for this team. There's still Alex Bregman out there. There's still Cody Bellinger. There's still Kyle Tucker. There's lots of names out there this Phillies team can still work to bring in and get you over that hump, because right now there's just no real excitement going into next season with this team. It's, again, I'll keep using this reference. It's like that girl that you keep going back to, but nothing is changing. And that's how this Phillies team has been for the last few years. You continue to buy in, you continue to fill the stands, and then you get to Red October, and every year they just disappoint more and more, and you get less far and less far every single year. And I need something from this Phillies team. They're my favorite Philadelphia sports team. They're the easiest to lock in on. When they're playing well, it is a great environment. Going to a baseball game, I still believe, is 10 times better than going to a football game, and just the environment that you have at the ballpark in the summer, in the spring. And then when you get to Red October, the atmosphere is phenomenal, but you need to give fans a reason to believe year in and year out. And in the past few years, you have not shown that you care enough to get over that hump. You haven't brought in anything of real talent in the past few years. Other than Schwarber and Castellanos a few years ago. Now you're pretty much just letting Castellanos walk because of how bad you messed up on that one and how poor he has played. I will still defend Castellanos in the fact that I don't think he's as bad as people say, but he has not been the player that he was on the Cincinnati Reds when you originally brought him in. Kyle Schwarber has done what he's done. I do not agree with that signing still, because I think that limits you in the long term, signing him to a 5-year contract. That clogs up that DH position, and you're still not getting any younger in talent, and you're not bringing in younger talent. That's where I think a Harrison Bader, again, would be that younger player to bring in here to change the environment, to not start a rebuild, but start rebuilding into something a little bit different. And that's what this Phillies team needs. So if it does take a JT Realmuto leaving, or a Ranger Suarez leaving, or a Harrison Bader not coming back, there needs to be something in replace of that. There needs to be another big move that this Phillies team can make, that Dave Dombrowski can make, that John Middleton can make, to say that they do want this. You can't keep giving lip service and not giving anything on the other end of it. It's very much, we want to win. Oh, we'll get them next year. But then you don't do anything to make that change. You got to look at the man in the mirror. I was listening on the way down here. You got to look at the man in the mirror, like Michael Jackson says. And this Phillies team has not looked themselves in the mirror. They have not realized what mistakes they've made over the past few years, and they've not made that change. But that's everything going on with the Phillies right now. Lots to talk about in college football. So when we come back from this break, we'll be getting right into that. Stay tuned here on 95.3 WCHE. Locker Room Buzz. I'm your host, CJ Tully, and like I said before, there is lots going on in college football. There's always going to be controversy in college football. You look at the playoffs right now, they have performed pretty well as all these teams. We did see some big upsets last week. We have some big games coming up this week and the transfer portal. So as always, let's talk some college football. So 2025 did not end all that well for Ohio State as they lose on New Year's Eve 24-14 to Miami. Carson Beck in this one goes 19 for 26 with 138 yards. And this is something we've seen with Carson Beck a lot, especially in the playoffs here, has been the fact that he doesn't need to throw for a tremendous amount of yards to get these wins. He's been relying on the defense. In this game, you saw a pick six, and you also saw 2 interceptions in total with 5 sacks, and that's how this Miami team has continued to win. Mark Fletcher Jr. on the other end has been a difference maker in his own right. 19 carries for 90 yards. He also had 25 receiving yards with a touchdown in this one. Malachi Toney did fumble twice, but the ball bounced right back to his hands. So very lucky on that. The other side of things, we saw Julian Sain play his final game of the year, 22 for 35, 287 yards with a touchdown and those 2 interceptions. Bo Jackson on the ground could only get 55 yards and a touchdown. Jeremiah Smith had a great day, though, 157 yards with a touchdown, but we'll see what this Ohio State team will be next year. Jeremiah Smith has announced that he will stay with Ohio State. Meanwhile, Carnell Tate, he's going to be heading to the NFL draft. I've seen that it is rumored he could be going to the Giants, which I would love for them. You pair him up with Malik Neighbors, you have Cam Scatterbo, and you have Jackson Dart. That is a great young team that they could form over there in New York. Next game that we had was on New Year's Day. We had Oregon defeat Texas Tech 23-0. And that's not how I saw this game going whatsoever. This Texas Tech team was dominating teams all season long. Now, this is where it comes back to the conversation. Is the Big 12 a real competition? Can you count these games? Texas Tech won 12 of their games by 20-plus points. So this offense was dominant all season long. You saw players like Coy Virgil, Reggie Virgil, Terrence Carter Jr., Jacoby Williams making a difference for this team all season long. Baron Morton did not lose a game all season long. But this Oregon defense, who's been very underrated this season, stepped up and could not let Texas Tech get going. Dante Moore, 26 for 33, 234 yards with a touchdown. Jordan Davison, 42 yards with 2 touchdowns. And Noah Whittington had himself 13 carries for 31 yards on the day as well. Number one receiver was the tight end Jamari Johnson, and we're still starting to see DeCorian Moore work his way into this offense after coming back from injury. Just 1 reception for 5 yards last week. This week with 3 receptions for 21. Brandon Finley Jr., he had 2 interceptions on the day, and something that really stood out to me with this Oregon offense was they went for it 8 times on 4th down, and they won 23-0. This team did not need to do this. They were looking to put on the boom. They go for it for 8 on those 4th downs, so this is a very aggressive Dan Lanning team. I like that. I saw that with him. Now, you would have hoped to convert on a few more of those. But with that being said, they're going to be taking on a great team this upcoming week in Indiana. And I think this was Dan Lanning kind of testing the waters, seeing what he has and seeing what he could do next week against them. So we saw a great game there from them. Baron Morton, 18 for 32, 137 yards with 2 interceptions for Texas Tech. This offense could not get going. Every time they would take 1 step forward, they would take 10 yards backwards after every false start they would take. It was just not looking great for this Texas Tech team. So Oregon advances 23-0 over Texas Tech. We also had Alabama take on Indiana in the Rose Bowl, and this game was highly anticipated. There was a lot to look forward to in this one. You saw an Alabama team come back down 17-0 against Oklahoma the week prior. They were showing up in this game, and you're hoping to see that next page turn for Alabama. They get stomped by Indiana coming off the bye week 38-3. And Indiana was the first team now to have the bye week and to win in the past 2 years. So this was huge for them to come out here guns a-blazing. Didn't look like they lost any stride since that Big Ten championship game. Only got better. Now, something important to note here is Ty Simpson did get hurt and did not play the second half of this game, which left it to Austin Mack, who goes 11 for 16 for 103 yards. Ty Simpson did have a fumble in that first half, but again, Indiana showed up huge in this game. They went 14 for 16, did Fernando Mendoza for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns. Kalen Black on the ground, 99 yards and a touchdown. Roman Hemby on the ground, 89 yards and a touchdown. Then you have Charlie Becker, Omar Cooper Jr., and Elijah Surratt all get a receiving touchdown. This team put on the power. They go over 407 total yards. And then with that, they also held Alabama to 3 for 11 on 3rd downs and just 193 yards on the game. So Indiana is a dominant force. And this is going to play true even in this game here coming up against Oregon, because you've seen the way that Indiana doesn't let the foot off the gas. Curt Cignetti has been phenomenal for this team. They signed him to his 8-year extension, and Fernando Mendoza has taken everything that has happened in this season in stride. Winning the Heisman, he's now highly touted coming into the NFL draft, so looking like he's going to be the number one pick. And he has not let that get to his head. He still played composed, great football. Again, only 2 incompletions in this game against Alabama on the biggest stage that he has ever touched. Phenomenal game there by him. To close out the night, we had fireworks on New Year's night as Ole Miss wins 39-34 over Georgia in what was an absolute shootout to finish out the night. Trinidad Chambers, 30 for 46, 362 yards with 2 touchdowns, only rushing for 14 yards, and that's something that's going to have to change when they play this Miami team, as he's going to have to roll out and make some plays happen with his legs. But Trinidad Chambers at the end of this game was just airing it out. I mean, he had 200-yard wide receivers, and Dazon Stribling and Harrison Wallace III going for 156 and 122 were the 2 of those. And then Kawan Lacey still making a difference on the ground. 22 carries for 98 yards and 2 touchdowns. And something that's very unique with this team is, yes, they lost Lane Kiffin, but they played Georgia earlier this year, and Kawan Lacey had one of his worst games of the season. He then turned that completely around with Charlie Weis still at offensive coordinator, Pete Golding at head coach, and they were able to adjust from a great Kirby Smart team. And that defense of Georgia was phenomenal against Alabama in the SEC championship game, and it was no match for what this offense was able to put together. I would not be surprised if this is something that Charlie Weis is looking at and saying, why would I leave what we're establishing here and head over to LSU, have to rebuild this entire thing, because you are going to see Kawan Lacey returning for Ole Miss next year, and there is a chance Trinidad Chambers can get accepted for a 6th year and stay with Ole Miss as well. They can run this team back, and they can really start to build something here with the characters that they have. So if I'm Charlie Weis, I'm taking a second look here, and if I'm Lane Kiffin, I'm a little worried to see what this Ole Miss team can do, because that's going to take a lot of pull from what you're going to try and build over there at LSU and how sloppy it was when you left. I think a lot of people have a very bad view of Lane Kiffin right now, and the way that Ole Miss is playing has definitely helped their case in all of this. Lucas Canero is somebody else I want to point out in this game. 3 for 3 for field goals with 2 from 50+, including a long of 56. That's something that can pay dividends in the playoffs, especially when you have to get those late points. That was definitely how it helped out Ole Miss in this one to be able to stay in the game. Gunnar Stockton, though, for Georgia, he had an all-right day. 18 for 31, 203 yards and a touchdown. He also rushed for 2 touchdowns as well. So overall, there were some great games last weekend. That's going to set up some great matchups here this upcoming week, as we're going to have Miami taking on Ole Miss, as I mentioned before. And this matchup is going to come down to the defense of Miami taking on the offense of Ole Miss. This is where the difference is going to be made. If Miami can continue to get their pressures on quarterbacks, again, 5 sacks against Ohio State, they had 7 sacks against Texas A&M, and with that, they had 2 interceptions in both games as well. So the defense has been the difference maker. Ruben Bain Jr. has been an absolute monster for this team. He's definitely going to be a first-round pick next year. So that's where they have to make the difference, is how much can they rely on this defense? Because Carson Beck, in their losses this year against Louisville and SMU, we saw 4 interceptions in that Louisville game and 2 against SMU. So he can definitely lose you a game. The 2 games that they lost this year were because of Carson Beck, but he hasn't been doing anything to help them win, and that is completely fine. If you can leave Carson Beck to just be a game manager, this Miami team will be fine. You look at his weapons, he's able to rely on Mark Fletcher Jr. a lot. This Ole Miss defense is not going to give them as much trouble as that Ohio State defense would have, so I'm looking forward to seeing that matchup. And then you look at this Ole Miss offense, and can Trinidad Chambers continue to be an absolute game changer? I mean, he has been one of the biggest storylines in college football this year, playing at a D2 school last year, coming in this year as a backup to Ole Miss. He takes over as a starter. Austin Simmons is now on his way to Missouri, I believe, from Ole Miss. So he has completely changed his career, his trajectory, and obviously looking for that final year to stay with Ole Miss, as he was redshirting during an injury in his first year here with his D2 school. So a lot of interesting stuff with this Ole Miss team. It's kind of that story of destiny. Can they get over that hump with so much background noise? This Ole Miss team was really given no chance once Lane Kiffin left. And Pete Golding has done a tremendous job, and I think a lot of teams have to look at that as a guy who came in here, defensive coordinator, just put in a position to be a head coach, and he has stepped up in every way possible. He has been able to be a leader of men, and that is something that is very important to any coaching staff these days, even in the NFL. I heard it yesterday, just talking about Nick Sirianni, even how he is a leader of men. He might not be the best game day coordinator or best play caller or anything, but when you look at Nick Sirianni, that is a leader of men. He knows how to control his locker room, and that's what we're seeing here with Pete Golding and the way that he is able to handle everything, all the outside noise going on with this Ole Miss team. So with that being said, I'm still going to take Miami in this game. I didn't believe that they deserved to be in the playoffs. I was a big Notre Dame guy, deserved to be in. But Miami has made a difference, and Mario Cristobal has been a dominant force at the head coach, and he has been able to lead this team. Again, another guy who's just able to lead his men, knows what their end goal wants to be, and he is in here with a mission, and he is playing well on that right now. Again, that 24-14 win over Ohio State was a statement right there by Miami. They were 11.5-point underdogs at one point last week, and they showed up and they won by 10. So great on Miami. I think they will be able to overcome this great offense that Ole Miss has. But if Ole Miss's offense can get going and this ball gets put in Carson Beck's hands to make the difference, that's where I can see this whole thing falling apart for Miami, is if Carson Beck has to win them the game. Moving on to the next game we're going to have, though, it's a rematch of a game we saw earlier this year as Oregon takes on Indiana. Now, in that game earlier this year, Indiana goes on the road and beats Oregon 30-20, and we just did not see a great game by Dante Moore. 2 interceptions in that one. Meanwhile, Fernando Mendoza, he goes for 215 yards. And Roman Hemby, the backup running back, was the difference maker with 2 touchdowns on the ground in that one. So what does that do? Where can we see the storylines coming into this game? Well, again, this is a very dominant Indiana team. They can beat you on offense. They can beat you on defense. They're the top-ranked defense right now in college football. And if you're playing like that, you're playing lights out on defense, you're able to put the ball in all of these playmakers' hands, that's where this Indiana team can completely dominate you. And something else to stand out in all of this is the way that Dante Moore has played of late. Now, yes, they're playing winning football, but 2 interceptions last week, 2 interceptions against JMU earlier in their first matchup this postseason. So can Dante Moore, again, can he manage the game properly? Yes, he can be a difference maker. He knows how to air the ball out. But if he's turning the ball over, that's where you're going to see issues. That's where you're going to see mistakes. And this Indiana team did not let Oregon run the ball well at all in their matchup earlier this year. Just 81 yards on the ground. And Oregon is one of the most powerful running teams in all of college football with 3 monsters in the backfield that can get it done. So if Indiana is able to compose themselves, is able to play well, is able to not look past Oregon, I think that Indiana is really going to dominate in this game. I don't really see an out for Oregon. Now, they have been able to force turnovers on their defensive side as well. And if they're able to do that, that's where I could see a difference be made. You did have Brandon Finley Jr. He had to pick 6 in that game against Indiana earlier this year, and we also saw him with 2 interceptions in this postseason already. So that's where the difference can be made, but I do think this Indiana team is going to be too much for Oregon, and I'm somebody who was very high on Oregon coming into this, but I am predicting a Miami-Indiana national championship, and I think that's a great story all around for all of these players. It would have been cool to see Carson Beck go up against Georgia if they were able to knock off Ole Miss. To kind of see that revenge game. But give me Indiana taking on Miami in the national championship. I did just post a video breaking down this even further on YouTube. You can check that out at Let's Talk Sports. That's Let's TAWK Sports on YouTube. It'll also be posted on my website at letstalksports.com. When I come back from this quick break, we're going to be talking about everything going on in the transfer portal, so stay right here on 95.3 WCHE. I'm your host, CJ Tully. We're going to continue on college football here as it is transfer season, and we're seeing a lot of that going on right now in college football. So starting off with some of the biggest ones we have seen thus far. You look over here at what Auburn is able to do, and they bring their head coach from South Florida, and he's going to bring Byron Brown with him over there to Auburn. And Byron Brown is one of the most exciting quarterbacks that I've seen this season. He's very lethal with his legs and knows when to drop the shoulder and make a run for himself. So that's something I'm looking forward to see there in the SEC now with Auburn. We also have Aiden Childs, who was one of the biggest prospects coming out of Michigan State. He had himself a decent season, not anything that people really thought it would be, but now going to Northwestern, I thought he was a possible Penn State commit before, obviously, the Rocco Beck announcement. But Rocco Beck, like that, he's now going from Iowa State to join his coach over there at Penn State. And Penn State has taken 19 players from Iowa State since Matt Campbell has been announced as the head coach. So pretty much Iowa State, Penn State is now the same team. So we'll see what they're able to bring over there with the Big Ten. Then you look at some of these other quarterbacks. You have Austin Simmons. I mentioned this earlier from Ole Miss. He's going to be going over to Missouri. He was obviously the backup this season now to Trinidad Chambers after losing his starting role. On the running back side of things, some of the players we're looking at here, you look at somebody like a Julian Lucas. He's going from Florida State over to Tulane. And the biggest running back change that I've seen thus far is going to be James Peoples. He's going to be going from Ohio State over to Penn State. We've also seen a few big plays go from North Texas over to Oklahoma State. And this is kind of just like the same situation you were seeing with Penn State taking all the Iowa State players, now with the head coach going over there. You see this now with North Texas taking on the Oklahoma team. And now you're going to see Drew Mestemaker, Wyatt Young, and Caleb Hawkins all go over from there and move themselves over to Oklahoma. That's the quarterback, running back, and number one wide receiver that North Texas had this year. And North Texas was a very solid team. So I'm excited to see what they're able to do there. We also have lots of players going into the draft, and we're going to see players, like I said, Carnell Tate, who'll be going over. Fernando Mendoza, Ty Simpson most recently just announced this. Jeremiah Love will be heading up there. Nick Singleton from Penn State. So lots of change will be happening for next season. Very excited to see what happens with a lot of this, as there is so many different things that go on in college football now, with the way that the coaching carousel has been, with the way that coaches are able to bring players with the NIL deals. It's all very, very exciting stuff, but that's everything going on in college football right now. I do want to talk some NFL and welcome my guest to the show here. We have Ryan. You guys have probably become familiar with him over the past few weeks. He is the host of the Happy Hour over at WCUR. He was my former co-host, and he is my brother from Tailgate with the Tully. So, Ryan, thank you for joining us one last time before you take on your teaching endeavors.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, CJ. It's always a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, of course. So, like I said, Ryan's going to be doing student teaching starting next week.
Next Monday, yes.
Next Monday, so excited to see what you do with that. Mr. Tully will be back in the classroom. So, and like I said, excited to see all that. But this guy knows some football, so lots to talk about here with just football in general. You look here at this coaching carousel, and I've talked a lot in the past about how this coaching carousel has impacted college football. Now we're seeing it take on the NFL. With so far, we have about 7 coaches fired right now, just on Monday alone. We have Brian Callahan fired from the Titans. We have Brian Daboll fired from the Giants. That was earlier this year. Raheem Morris from the Falcons. Kevin Stefanski from the Browns. Pete Carroll from the Raiders. Jonathan Gannon from the Cardinals. And the Ravens, John Harbaugh. Which one stood out the most to you?
I think the one that stood out the most to me was John Harbaugh, and not because I don't think he deserved to be fired. I just think when you have a prestigious franchise like the Ravens, a franchise that's known for being a playoff contender year in and year out, just for him to finally get to that point where they do fire him. The Ravens known for a complete fall off in the last couple of years with the way they lose games. They lost this year because of the missed field goal by Tyler Loop. They lost last year because of Mark Andrews drops. The year before, they lost the game against the Chiefs because of the Zay Flowers fumble. There's just been so many situations where you don't know who to blame. Is it a Lamar Jackson issue? I don't believe so. I think it has to come down to coaching, because there comes a point where you can't blame your players when it's the same situation every year. It has to come down to coaching. I'm just very surprised that they actually did fire him. And I think a lot of the guys that did get fired, you saw coming because they're on teams with poor situations. When it comes to Brian Callahan, when it comes to Brian Daboll, Stefanski, Raheem Morris, those are all teams that have been put in bad positions. And I think the head coach just takes the fall for some of those ones. And those ones were very likely to happen.
Yeah, I was also really surprised about John Harbaugh. And I think, to me, this raises a bigger question. If the Steelers were the ones to lose that game, would they have been so quick to pull the trigger as well? Because we've seen Mike Tomlin, he's a name out there as well, that people are, especially in Pittsburgh, are quick to say he's been the issue. I mean, they've been a very mid-team for years now. They get to the playoffs, or they'll just miss the playoffs, but they're in the middle of the pack. They never get a high draft pick because they never completely tank, but they never get a deep playoff run anymore. And Mike Tomlin's another name that's been out there, and I'm still curious to see if the Steelers are a first-round exit and they just squeaked their way in, they got past the Ravens, who obviously didn't deserve to be in either. Will there still be a quick leash on Mike Tomlin? Could he be somebody that goes, especially with all these other openings? You now have some pretty big names out there in the coaching carousel, so maybe the Steelers see somebody that grabs their eye that they want to bring in there, maybe change their culture. I'm just thinking of this now, but I could see a Pete Carroll going to the Steelers. I know he's that old school kind of coaching, that old school caliber, and that's definitely how the Steelers build their program. So obviously didn't work out for the Raiders this year with Pete Carroll. They could not find a way to win whatsoever. He went in there with a chip on his shoulder. The same with Geno Smith, 2 guys that were kind of disproven, said they couldn't do it anymore, went in there wanting to prove something, and it kind of just made them look incompetent because they weren't able to make anything happen. And I'd be curious to see what the Steelers do. Again, if they are a first-round exit, now they can make a deep run, and Mike Tomlin looks like a savior. But if they're to get bounced, with seeing how quickly the Ravens moved on for John Harbaugh, and they're going to be flipping their page over to the next chapter, maybe it's time for the Steelers to do the same. Could you see the Steelers moving on from Tomlin?
I don't see them ever moving on from him. He's never had a losing season, like you said. That could be a good thing, but I think it's more of a bad thing. You don't ever see them get the high draft pick. You saw this year they struggled to find a quarterback. They ended up with Aaron Rodgers, and I think that kind of hurts them, especially when there are drafts coming up with good quarterbacks. You don't have a high draft pick to get one of those guys. You'd have to trade for it. You don't really have a roster that's worth trading. You saw them get rid of George Pickens, and then George Pickens becomes a star on another team. So is it a Steelers issue? Is it a coaching issue? I don't see them moving on from Mike Tomlin, but do you want just consistent years of being 9-8, being 10-7, and barely making the playoffs, or barely missing the playoffs, and just never being great? That's kind of the thing you see with the Phillies even, is just getting to the playoffs and then losing in the first round. And I think if the Steelers want to make a push soon, they got to get rid of Tomlin because I think you're just beating a dead horse.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of that, and we've also been seeing a lot about the possibility of John Harbaugh joining the Giants. Now, this news just broke last night about the John Harbaugh firing, but I've heard it now from multiple sources, seen it rumored a few times on social media as well, that maybe you could see John Harbaugh headed over to the Giants. This would be a huge move for them. Now, John Harbaugh, if I'm not mistaken, is a very special teams-oriented kind of coach. With this, he is a little bit more offensive as well, I believe more so than defensive aimed. And you look at the Giants and the way that they've started to build things. And even if, let's say, Harbaugh does want to gear more towards the defense, they have built a great defense over there as well. Maybe you can use a few corners, but that defensive line is going to be something to deal with for a while now. You look at on the offensive side, though, and like I mentioned before when talking about the possibility of Carnell Tate going over there, you pair him up, he'd be with Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterbo, Malik Neighbors. I mean, this is a Giants team that's maybe 1 or 2 years away from tasting the playoffs and making some kind of run in just a few more years. You look at the way that the NFC East has been performing of late, and the Cowboys, they're going to cowboy. The Commanders jumped the gun way too quickly. They had one good year. They brought in a lot of veteran talent thinking they were just right there. You had the Jaden Daniels injury, and now we're seeing the Commanders. They're going to be falling back a few years, in my opinion, until we're going to be able to see them make another push. And the Eagles, obviously, biases here. They're going to be great, but again, there's the question marks. Is A.J. Brown going to be back next year? Kevin Patullo going to be back? What will his offense be with yet another offensive coordinator? So there's all those questions as well. If the Giants can get ahead of all of this, bring in a vet who coached 18 years with the Ravens and John Harbaugh, I think this team could be something to compete with for years to come. I think this team is going to be starting from the ground up. They've been building something. Before Scatterbo went out, I mean, they were a competitive team. Same with Malik Neighbors. This team could have been a 7-win team, an 8-win team, had been healthy all season long. Now, probably wouldn't be enough for a playoff spot, but they could have competed with the Packers for that final wild card spot. So very curious to see if they were able to bring in a John Harbaugh, what this Giants team could be. You look at some of these other firings, Kevin Stefanski, he's somebody I've been more recently saying that I think he could be going to the Cowboys as a defensive coordinator as they just fired theirs. Eric wasn't a huge fan of that one, but we'll see what happens with that. That defense was horrible this season, so we'll see what they can do. Pete Carroll, I mentioned before. Jonathan Gannon's an interesting one. Goes to the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals have bigger issues than coaching. You're still curious what they're going to do with Kyler Murray. Will they move on from him? He's kind of been a stagnant player. Haven't seen much growth, but you haven't really seen much recession, so it's what are you getting out of him going forward? Do you draft somebody, see what they can work their way up? There's going to be a decent amount of quarterbacks in this draft. Maybe not first-round talent necessarily, as after Dante Moore and Fernando Mendoza, you might not be seeing the same skill level. Ty Simpson, he'll be in there. Possibly Drew Aller, Cade Klubnik, some of the names you guys can look forward to. But they could be somebody that you help grow on a lower-end team. The Cardinals are especially that right now. You see what Jacoby Brissett has been doing for them. So maybe that's something you can start to look at. This Titans team and firing their head coach, Brian Callahan, I don't know what the next play is for them. Cam Ward didn't have a horrible year, but I don't think the Titans have they have enough to compete for a while, especially with the way the AFC West has been playing. You look at some player or some of the team or South. You look at the teams like the Texans, the Jaguars. They're going to be competing for a while now. I don't know where the Titans find themselves. I know a few years ago they had a little bit of a push, but not sure where this Titans team is going to find themselves. You look at Tennessee as a whole; they don't have much to really watch. So this football team, if they got good, that would be a fun team to watch grow. But do any of these that I just said, does John Harbaugh going to the Giants stand out to you? Who do you think can flip the Titans? What do you think goes on with the Cardinals?
Starting with the Titans, I don't think anybody could flip that. I think there are so many gaps in that. You think about when they traded A.J. Brown to the Eagles, they drafted, and I'm completely blanking on his name right now, but they drafted a guy, and everyone was saying that he was going to be the next A.J. Brown. He got hurt in his rookie season and just hasn't been back since. Cam Ward situation, obviously, if you're the first overall pick, you're going to get put into a bad position, unless you're Caleb Williams. But there's just so many holes. The running back core isn't bad, but it's nothing like Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard would be good backup running backs when you're 1 and 2. That's not something you want to see. So I think the Titans are just going to be a coaching carousel for the next couple of years of who gets in there.
I want to cut you off real quick because you mentioned how the Bears were able to fix it with Caleb Williams and how he wasn't put in a horrible position. But you look at that organization as a whole, they brought in Brian Johnson. They worked with him. They went to fix that culture and everything else. You bring in Cam Ward, you could have done that where you just with Cam Ward, you work with the team. Maybe that's what they're trying to start up here. But you filled the pieces around Caleb Williams to make that team the way it is, to bring in the coaching staff that can work with him. And maybe that's the next step for the Titans is just bringing in who can work with Cam Ward. How can they fix this? What players do they need around him to make him a dominant player in the NFL?
Yeah, but I think there's just so many holes where it's like the Bears, it was like, we'll get a wide receiver here, we'll get DeAndre Swift, and then they worked from there. I just think there's so many missing pieces.
So you think it's more than just the coach?
I think it is way more than just the coach. I think the pairing of Ben Johnson with Caleb Williams did save Caleb Williams, because even last year, the Bears were not a good football team, so I think that was a situation where you had the foundation, brought in the coach. Right now in the Titans, you need a coach and the foundation. John Harbaugh to the Giants would scare me as an Eagles fan, because I think John Harbaugh is a good coach. I think the Giants have a lot of young pieces that could really make a run on offense, especially in the next couple of years. I think Jackson Dart was a great addition there. He's a dog. Cam Scatterbo, a dog. If both of them can stop throwing their head around, I think they could be good for a long period of time. You saw Malik Neighbors go out early, and they were probably the most fun 3-win team I've ever seen in my life. They played every game competitively. They beat the Eagles. They had that great game against the Cowboys earlier in the year where they lost in overtime. So they are a fun team and a good team. I just think that there's a couple of gaps that they can fill in with the draft or trading. Like you said, that defensive line is going to be disgustingly good, and it scares me. But I do think that John Harbaugh would really not save the team, but I think he could really help bring them together, especially maybe get a new locker room vibe together. And then Jonathan Gannon's situation, I thought that was weird in general, because he was a good defensive coordinator. The Eagles' defense in 2022 was amazing, and I think that was a big part because of him. But we also had a lot of pieces. When you go from head coach to our offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator to head coach to a bad team, it is such a tough job to save yourself from. You look at Kellen Moore with the Saints. I don't know how long it will take for Kellen Moore to be successful with the Saints. I think the Cardinals gave Jonathan Gannon a lot of wiggle room to make it work. And even to fill some of these other open positions, there's still a lot of head coaches that just because they made the playoffs, their job isn't necessarily safe. You said Mike Tomlin. I think Matt LaFleur is another one who the Packers are a prestigious franchise, and if you don't make a run, people don't want you there anymore. And the Packers have not been able to make a run. So I'll be very interested to see what happens.
Yeah, I'll be interested too, because Mike McCarthy is another name to keep an eye on. He took a few years off coaching, but he was not a bad coach, especially with the Cowboys. I don't think he was necessarily the issue there. I mean, the Cowboys just can't win football. That's just the way it is. I wouldn't blame him. Obviously had his success there with the Packers. He's a name I would keep an eye on. And I think this Raiders team has the chance to do great things. So if I'm a coach, I wouldn't hate going there. You have Tom Brady in the ears of everybody in the league. You have Ashton Jeanty, who if you can get him going. Now, I did say going into the NFL, he would not be the same player. He was at Boise State. I thought that's why I didn't think he deserved the Heisman. But you look at something like that, and you're going to bring in a Fernando Mendoza. You can work on some receivers on the outside. There's a lot you can work on with this Raiders team if you get the right guy in there. Max Crosby doesn't want to leave, but you might have ticked him the wrong way, and now he might want out. So there's a lot of organizational issues I think you can fix, but there's chance here. There's hope. Brock Bowers, another one. You have players on this team that you can grow with and work with. So curious to see what they do with that. And Mike McCarthy, a name I would keep an eye on. Now, right before we get to this break, I do want to start teasing some of these NFL playoff games we're going to have. We'll start off here with the Steelers and the Texans. This is a game, I think, either way I would be favoring the Texans. Now, obviously they're going to be on the road, but the Texans are a team that they're much more dominant than the Steelers or Ravens would have brought to any game now. That will be the Steelers matching up with them. But this Texans defense has been absolutely phenomenal. They're ranked number 1 right now in total defense. They have 19 interceptions, 47 sacks, and they're allowing just 277 yards per game. So this Texans defense is dominant. And you look at the Steelers offense, it takes them a lot to get something going. They weren't able to convert on fourth downs. They were horrible in the red zone in that game against the Ravens. So this Texans team, again, if the defense can lock in, will be a dominant win. Now, C.J. Stroud has had his ups and downs throughout the season. He's dealt with some injury as well. Somebody who's been a bright spot, though, is Woody Marks coming in at running back. I do believe this Texans team will dominate on the road. I would love to see the Steelers make a deep run. That is another organization that I'd love to go to a Steelers game. They kind of have a great cult following as well, but I don't think this is the year for that, and I don't think Aaron Rodgers will play another football game after this.
Yeah, no, I think that this Texans team is very elite. I think that they've kind of been overlooked. I do think that they have a lighter schedule than some of the people, which helps inflate their stats a little bit, but when C.J. Stroud gets it going and he's able to unleash the ball to his receivers deep, and you see Nico Collins is very successful in the deep game, I think when that is there, I think that's where you see a lot of success from this Texans team. Obviously, when you have a lockdown defense, it makes it easier to take the shot. And so I think if this defense can stop the Steelers offense, which, like you said, isn't great. I mean, they do get DK Metcalf back this week after his suspension. But I still think when you're MVP of your season and you're most reliable guy is Kenny Gainwell,
G.
which no disrespect to Kenny Gainwell, but you are a great franchise, and I don't think you should be relying so much on a starting off the season second-string running back, and I think that's where you see a lot of issues here. I also think that you have to trust Aaron Rodgers to take over more of the play calling issue, like let him make his decisions, because I think when you try and take that away from him, you see a lot of downfall on the Steelers. I saw something I was talking about his 2-minute drive. When he did it, he got them all the way down to the red zone, and then they switched it over to the coach's play calling, and they stalled. So I think you just got to let Aaron Rodgers do his thing if you want to have a chance, because while, yes, Aaron Rodgers is old, he has so much experience and so much success in the NFL that I think you have to give him the chance, especially against a tough defense like the Texans. Aaron Rodgers might be the one guy to go into a game against a tough defense and be able to succeed just because of how good he is.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's lots to look forward to in this game. Lots more to talk about, too, as well. We'll head to a quick break, and then it's going to be all football. So stay tuned here on 95.3 WCHE. And welcome back to Locker Room Buzz. I'm your host, CJ Tully, here with my brother and host of the Happy Hour, Ryan Tully. That's over on WCUR. I'll be starting up next week.
January 19th, I believe.
All right, so you can tune into that. Still unsure of the time, but I'm sure I'll promote it when we do know the time. So I do want to go to this Eagles game, though, because we only have about 12 minutes left. So I know we can ramble. So I want to kick this off before we forget about it. Eagles will be taking on the 49ers. It's a playoff matchup we saw a few years ago now. Injuries played a huge factor in that game. There's a lot of animosity as well. So looking forward to this one. Trent Williams still questionable for them. They also have Ricky Pearsall still questionable. So injuries could play a factor in this game. It's looking like both of them are gearing towards playing. On the Eagles side of things, we have injuries as well. Jalen Phillips, Lane Johnson, Dallas Goedert, Marcus Epps, Nakobe Dean, and Jalen Carter, all questionable as well. Would assume everybody would be playing in a playoff game here. I think the Eagles match up very well against this 49ers team, especially with the injuries. The way this Niners offense has been very spotty, especially with Brock Purdy at the backfield. I think this is the quarterback I would have liked to see the most out of anybody here, even more so than a Bryce Young, in my opinion, just because you don't get that same escapability and the kind of movement you would get with a Bryce Young. But it's going to come down to Christian McCaffrey, and it's going to come down to George Kittle. These are the two guys that can beat you in many aspects of this game, and it really comes down to Eagles defense more so than our offense, because I'm expecting the offense to maybe put up 14 to 21 points. Can the defense stand in all these positions, especially in the first playoff game? You've had them well rested. It's a very deep defense, which I think plays huge when it comes to the playoffs. I mean, you look at our linebacking squad, and we had backups of Trotter and Jahad Campbell playing this week. Those are guys that would be starting on a majority of teams. So can the Eagles overcome can the 49ers really overcome the Eagles? Because I would definitely think the Eagles would be favored here.
Yeah, I see the Eagles winning this one. I think the biggest thing for this game would be for the Eagles to stop Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle, like you said. I think our linebackers match up very well with Kittle and McCaffrey, and I think that that's not going to be as big of an issue as it is for other teams because of the strength of our linebackers. On the flip side, the 49ers have had a lot of trouble with linebackers covering the run game. So that's something that the Eagles are going to have to rely on here, is using the run game, using the middle of the field to take away the cornerbacks of this 49ers defense. The 49ers defense has struggled this year. You saw them let up 41 points to the Bears, so it's not something that would be that crazy if the Eagles were able to succeed against this 49ers defense. And then Brock Purdy, I gave him a lot of hype last week on the show, saying that he was really completely did a 180, and then he goes against the Seahawks and does a 180 backwards. So where Brock Purdy took 2 steps forwards, he just took 5 steps backwards for me. And I think that if the Eagles can force Brock Purdy to be the difference maker and have to make the plays, I think it's like CJ said with the Miami. If you force the game into Carson Beck's hand, if you force the game into Brock Purdy's hand, I think the Eagles win this one. I think our defense can absolutely shut this 49ers team down. Yeah,
that's where I'm really looking forward to see. And this could be one last run here with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley. So if they can get things functioning here in the postseason, prove everybody wrong that this team does know what they're doing. Kevin Patullo, he's on the hot seat as well. He's coaching for a possible head coaching job somewhere else. So this offense, as much as we put it on the defense and we just expect nothing from this offense, if they can get it going, this team has everything possible to just run through this playoffs. I mean, there's not a great, especially on the AFC side, once you get to the Super Bowl, Eagles would be favored against any of these teams. You're going to have some competition here with the Rams, Bears, Seahawks. They're obviously competitive teams, but If the Eagles are playing at their full capacity and they're playing like they should have all season long, there is no way that any team should be able to stop this Eagles team. The fans travel well. No game is going to be a true road game for this team. And this is seriously the year that the Eagles should be able to cakewalk their way, if playing at their full capacity, their way to another Super Bowl and go back-to-back. Because, again, nobody on this AFC side of things is scaring me whatsoever. The only team that maybe gives you a little headache during the week is going to be the Bills. But you just saw how they played. And Josh Allen hasn't been that guy. And we'll get right into that game here. We're going to have the Bills and the Jaguars. This is a game where the Jaguars have a real shot to make a statement. The Bills losing their stadium. They might have just had their last home game in that stadium. There's going to be emotion in this game for them as well. But can Josh Allen get over the hump? We look at the Eagles and how easy I said that should be for them. Josh Allen and the Bills, the way this team has been hyped up, the way Josh Allen has been hyped up, this game should not, this should be the year that the Bills go to the Super Bowl and they potentially win the Super Bowl with how this team has been years past. And I mean, Sean McDermott should be another name on the line as well if this team isn't able to get over the hump, because there is realistically no reason this Bills team shouldn't be in the Super Bowl this season with the team they've had. Now, I don't believe they have great skill on the outsides, but clearly they think they have a Super Bowl winning team where they would have gone out and made a move at some point. You saw Amari Cooper there last year, and he wasn't the difference maker. Right now, Khalil Shakir has been your guy. And other than that, there really isn't a weapon. James Cook has been able to carry Josh Allen to majority of the wins this year, about 1,600 yards for him on the season. So is this a do or die for the Bills? Is this going to tarnish any kind of legacy that Josh Allen could create as McDermott on the hot seat?
I think McDermott should be on the hot seat, and I think in a playoff without Mahomes, without Burrow, without Jackson, this has to be the year that Josh Allen gets to the Super Bowl at least. I could see you saying there's so much competition in the NFC, so maybe you don't win it, but you have to get there. And I think they got the toughest matchup off the rip, just with the Jaguars, a hot Jaguars team with Trevor Lawrence is looking great. Their defense has been playing well.
Oh.
Yeah, Liam Cohen has absolutely flipped the culture here. A lot of people were trash talking him, and for him to just come in here and do his thing and get this team to a 12 wins, or they got 13 wins.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, well, the Bills, yes, if they could beat this Jaguars team, could go into the Super Bowl. I think they got the toughest matchup out the gate.
Yeah, we'll start to speed run some of these as the show is winding down, but we're going to have the Steelers, or no, I mentioned that one. We're going to have the Patriots and the Chargers. Now, I've been very high on the Patriots, and I don't like to toot my own horn. I did say this team would be great this year. I said they'd make the playoffs. Didn't imagine the 2 seed, but the Patriots, they have been phenomenal all season long. They have found their weapons. They have found something in Drake May. Now, I'm going to be curious to see how Drake May performs next year, because we saw the same thing with Stroud and with some of these other young quarterbacks where they have a tremendous year and then they started to take a few steps back. But Mike Vrabel over there, I mean, he was born to be the coach of this team. I was very happy when they did decide to bring him in. Trevion Henderson, he's finally starting to be a part of this offense at the latter end of the season. Will Campbell, obviously dealing with injury. Actually, I can't even say he's been that great. He's been prone to a lot of penalties this season, but my boy over there from LSU, Stephon Diggs, he's been a big help to this team to bring some kind of a veteran presence. So I think the Patriots have a real chance here to make a run. They're going to be going up against the Chargers, who haven't shown me much. They're coming in here as the 7th seed. They obviously beat the Eagles, but again, that's a game where the Eagles lost it for themselves more so than the Chargers were able to beat them. And I just don't trust Justin Herbert to really get over that hump yet. Mario Hampton has looked good since coming back from injury. But do you believe in this Chargers team, or are the Patriots legit?
I do not believe in this Chargers team at all. I think that their issues with the offensive line are really going to cost them here in the playoffs. Their inconsistency with who's the wide receiver one and who's going to get the ball, I think, has also been an issue. They spread the ball out very well, but there's such a lack of consistency, which I think can cost them here. And I think, again, they got a tough draw with the Patriots. They actually rested their starters to completely eliminate the fact that they could have moved up and played a different team. So they were very content with playing the Patriots. And I think that if you're the Patriots, you got to take that as like hey, they wanted us. Let's give them what we got. And I think going into Foxborough, you have a whole new mentality with this Patriots team. A team that has so much success in the past, I think that the Patriots are going to go back there.
Yeah, it'd be really, well, I'll get to our predictions later this episode, but I do think the Patriots are going to make themselves a run. Going back over to the NFC side of things, we're going to have the Panthers and the Rams. The Rams are favored by 10.5 points in a playoff game. That is an abomination. I mean, you looked at the same thing with the Miami-Ohio State game. There should not be a spread that large in a playoff game. You looked at even the JMU and Tulane games, and if you have a spread, now I guess the spread is just Vegas, but if people are thinking the game's going to be that bad, it says something about the playoff format. But Panthers and the Rams did play the Panthers earlier this year, where the Panthers won at home 31-28. And in this game, you didn't even see the best out of anybody, really. I mean, Bryce Young played well, 15 for 20, 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's a solid day for him, but Matt Stafford, 2 interceptions. That will cost you. They had 2 rushing touchdowns, one by Corum and one by Kyron Williams. But can the Panthers do that again, or are the Rams back? You're going to have Devontae Adams back and healthy, and this team has many weapons that could beat you.
Yeah, I think the way to beat this Rams team is to do what they did against them the last time, was kind of force the run game and take the ball out of Stafford's hand. You saw him have 2 interceptions. I think that was kind of the game where it started turning, like maybe Stafford won't win the MVP. Obviously, he came back with a great performance, but I think that the Panthers have to shut down the pass game because that's what really the Rams' success has been. And so I think if you can just do that and then you get the run game going yourselves, because Dowdle and Hubbard have been great. Like going that two-headed dragon has been very successful for them. So I think you got to go back to that.
Conformity gate?
Conformity gate, yes. And you have to eliminate their pass game and get your run game going.
Yeah, and in the final game here, we're going to have a divisional matchup between the Bears and the Packers, and this is what football's about. I mean, this is the matchup everybody wants to see. The Bears against the Packers in Chicago. The Bears finally playing well. The Packers, on the other hand, they have a chance to upset here. Now, the 2 teams split their season series 1-1. Each team with the home game is the ones that won. The Packers, they've gotten pretty complacent here to finish out the season. Josh Jacobs isn't looking the best. Love, on the other hand, he has his moments, but with the wide receiving core they have, with Matthew Golden barely touching the ball this season, he's somebody I thought would have been a huge part of this team. He would have been a possible contender for All-Offensive Player of the Year. We just haven't seen it. We mentioned before what we've seen with this production of the Bears of late and how they have grown. Who do you take in this one? I've got the Bears.
I've also got the Bears. I think their ability to run the football and throw the football very well really gives them an advantage here. The Packers have had some troubles, especially with not having, again, they don't have a number 1 receiver. They have good receivers, but they don't have that guy you can just throw the ball to all the time. Josh Jacobs has had some troubles running the football at the end of the season there. And to just wrap it, I just think that this Bears team is successful with Ben Johnson.
Yeah, and then finally I'll give our Super Bowl predictions, who we think's going the way. I got the Patriots and the Eagles and a rematch from just a few years ago.
Yeah, I'm going to go on a different route. I'm going to go with the Eagles-Bills. I think this is what everybody wants. If you're like a good football fan, you'd want this, and I think that's what's going to end up happening here.
I do think the Seahawks as the 1 seed is scary. That home field advantage is a true home field advantage. The AFC side of things, though, I don't think the Broncos are really scaring me as the 1 seed. The Steelers aren't really, in my opinion, going to be making a run. The Chargers, there isn't that real contender. Yes, the Texans could go on a bit of a run, but I don't know if the offense is going to be able to support the defense enough to really get over some of these Patriots, Bills, or Jags. Like that Bills-Jags game could truly be for the Super Bowl. Whoever wins that game could be the team to make that run and go to the Super Bowl. And again, I think the Eagles, if playing at their full capacity, will be the best team in the NFC and in the NFL. That'll do it for here at Locker Room Buzz. I'm your host, CJ Tully, live every Wednesday, 11 to 12. Thanks for joining Ryan. You can check me out on social media at LRBuzz_pod and check out my website, letstalksports.com. That's TAWKsports.com for the latest in college football. Catch you guys next week.